Welcome to Practical AI, everybody. My name's Jeff. I'm with Peter Lind. Peter, I guess the question today is the era of AI startups over? And I asked the question because we had an article come up the other day, and it essentially is about Stability AI. And it looks to me like they're crashing. I don't want to use maybe the word bankruptcy without knowing more, but they've
Yeah.
run out of money and they are in dire straits. So, is this significant? Does this mean something? And does it paint a picture about kind of the state of AI and what's next?
Yeah, I would say it's not the end of AI startups, but it is the end of anyone that wants to just get in because you really need to have a blank check to really start an AI startup today because you need, like at least in the hundreds of millions of dollars for the first couple of years, and ideally you want probably $1 billion or more. Ideally like 10 would be a good number.
Okay, so we're talking oil money or state level money in order to sort of start up one of these sort of competitive
Yep.
AI platforms.
Yeah, and mainly because you need that money to just train models nonstop.
I mean, the story on stability is pretty horrific, especially when you look at some of the numbers, and I'll share it. I mean, they
Yeah.
spent 99 million on compute. They had generated in 2023 just 11 million in revenue, but that didn't include the 54 million in wages.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they just have this bloated, you know,
Yeah.
monster.
Yep.
So what is this like is this kind of going to be typical of sort of Silicon Valley, but just on a grand scale because it's AI? Or do you think they kind of screwed something up here?
No, I think they did what they had to do, which was train, right? In that paragraph, it said they spent $2.5 million worth of compute over a span of 4 months to let other researchers do cool stuff. And that sounds great. And they did a service. But then in the day, though, they can't pay their bills for AWS or Google Cloud because, it's easy to blow $1 million in training in a month. It's very easy. Yeah.
Yeah, right there, they underpaid their AWS bill. I mean, it's
Yep.
just so I mean, they're in trouble, obviously. It's maybe too early to predict what'll happen, but maybe a United Arab Emirates or someone comes in and says,
Yeah.
we'll buy you on the cheap. And they have a play that we've talked about, I think, a little bit, right? They've got the chip or the cards or whatever that they've kind of put together. Or they're funding that.
Yeah, so the United Emirates they're backing Cerebus, which is a wafer scale chip, which is basically one huge chip the size of a silicon wafer. And they're building a data center first in San Francisco, which they announced, I think it was either early this year or late last year. And then they're going to build the second one later on, but they're first going to build the first one in San Francisco. And they're being backed by big money, the Emirates. And I mean, if there's any AI startups that are kind of on the verge of running out of money, they're probably a good candidate to get picked up by the Emirates because they have the talent, the experience. They just need someone with a deep pocket that
Yeah.
can fund 2, 3 years of like training time.
Yeah, the interest, right? They need, again, it's oil or state level. It's something of that magnitude.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so back to sort of the startup universe. What's the solution here if it's too hard to get in now?
Mhm.
And what do we say last week? There might be 10 players in this space.
Right.
Well, you've just reduced that significantly if one of them goes down, right?
Right. Yeah. So right now you've got Midjourney, you've got Anthropic, OpenAI, um, you've got Elon's,
Grok.
what is it? And then you got Apple, that has got their Llama. AWS's version is they showed it off a few months back, but it's kind of like it's not very good.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
there's a pretty
Google.
yeah, and Google.
Yeah.
Then after that, you've got smaller teams like Mistol, which is open source, completely open source. They're training it from scratch.
And then you can take Llama 2 from Meta and you can fork it, but you still have to pay for that, right? So it's kind of
It's
it's a it's not
a
really an
freemium,
open source thing.
right?
It's right.
Freemium, you can use it for free for research or personal. The minute it's commercial, you have to buy a license.
Okay, so is there anything on the scale of Mistral that's even close on the open source space besides them?
I think right now they're the main player. There's probably other people that are doing some of the things, but they haven't come up high enough on the radar.
Okay, and how any idea the scale of Mistral in terms of, parameters compared to either Llama 2 or GPT 2.5 or 3 or whatever?
Yeah, I don't remember the details, but they did make an announcement recently that they've gotten pretty good performance and they're constantly improving. Um, and to me, that's probably once they get it to a good point, then other people can take it and then build on top of it. And that's when we'll see like it accelerate in the open source world. Because once that happens, there's no Google, there's no OpenAI, there's no Microsoft telling people what they can or can't do.
So essentially, the way open source works is that you typically might have 3 or 4, 10 projects that are kind of going on, and you start to see one sort of elevate a little bit.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's Mistral. And then once it gets to a certain level and capability, everybody kind of floods in and then grows it from there and kind of goes on their, but they
Yep.
use that as the platform. And I think this is kind of what happened with Apache and
With
uh,
Linux. Yep.
Next, and yeah, right. This is the same thing where
Yep.
it just it sort of culminates in one, right? One wins.
Yeah, because actually when Linus Torvalds started Linux back in 1992, when I was in college, there was this thing that, only programmers and geeks would like play with. And it used to come in CDs called Slackware because they're one of the few companies I thought, hey, this is a free operating system we can put on the CDs and distribute it. So that was one of the first places that you could download Linux and install it.
Hmm.
And I used to have several sets of those CDs. And then fast forward to 2000, it became like the operating system for web servers and it was powering the internet. But today, it's literally powering all the machine learning training is on Linux.
Yeah, it's amazing, and yet you have these behemoths, these castled off companies that are announcing that open source is a threat, and yet everybody's running on all their open source software.
Yeah, that's the hypocrisy of it all. It's like everyone's training all their models on open source, using Python, they're using GCC, everything is open source under the covers.
Yeah.
So like like there are definitely a small subgroup in the open source world that considers all those people leeches because they're not funding the people that have spent hundreds and thousands of hours contributing to these software projects.
Yeah.
Like Microsoft actually hired Guido, who is the founder and author of Python. So some companies do. Um, but like like AWS historically does not fund open source. They just take and they just do what they want with it.
All right, so pivoting away from the probable solution back to the problem, the it's probably not awesome that theoretically we're getting down to fewer and fewer companies that are capable at this point. You know,
Right.
until open source catches up, these whatever we listed off there, 8, 10 companies,
Right.
um, really have a pretty high castle wall around their kingdom,
They
and
do, but it's temporary.
it's temporary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any guess on the time frame?
I don't think anyone knows, and I think any guess anyone makes will probably be wrong. But I feel like there is a movement in open source to make models smaller and more efficient, and negating the need to have 10,000 NVIDIA A100 GPUs to do this work. Because if you can do it in 3 or 4 high-end consumer GPUs, then that opens up the world to like thousands of people to do similar kind of work.
Yeah, and I think next week we're gonna kind of delve into that a little bit, with kind of this the future and kind of guessing what who's gonna win and which of the behemoths are gonna kind of outlast the other ones. But in the meantime, I think it's going to be interesting to see where the how quickly open source can catch up to this while also watching the battles and the consolidation that happen
Yeah.
at the top, right, amongst the kingdoms. So, Peter, thank you. This is great. Appreciate you giving us some insight here. Like, subscribe, follow. We will try to answer questions when we can. We will see you next time. Take care.